This is episode 91 with Benjamin Baldwin.
Welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, the show that empowers you to become the hero of your life's journey. With your host, Bryan Teare.
We're looking to make the world a better place. What is up, everyone? This is your host, as always, Bryan Teare, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast. And those were the wise words of this week's guest, Benjamin Baldwin. Now, before we get to the interview with Ben, a quick shout out to our sponsors. It is Rooster, the awesome alarm clock app that allows you to wake up to news headlines, sports reports, inspiring channels, meditation tracks, and so much more, including voice notes from friends and family. So it's way better than that boring tone you're just hitting snooze on every day. And I highly recommend you check it out. You can find that on the Google Play Store or the App Store, and that is Rooster, Alarm, and Audio Treats. Now, on to this week's episode. And Benjamin Baldwin is a 26-year-old filmmaker and producer of the new documentary series Misunderstood, who describes himself as the stereotypical millennial looking to create a happy work-life balance while also striving for success. Coming from a family in business and real estate, Ben wanted to do something that made him happy and also that he loved to do. He wanted to create his own path. While Benjamin didn't study film, it was always a passion of his, and through internships, he worked his way up to a staff position at Saturday Night Live's production company in New York. Eventually, his path led him to freelance, working with Vice, ESPN, National Geographic, the History Channel, MTV, and so much more, as well as working on his own creative projects on the side. Most recently, Ben launched a passion project digital documentary series called Misunderstood, which aims to challenge the many negative connotations and misconceptions about the millennial generation. His mission with the project is to give a more raw and real look at what it means to be a millennial today and help others understand that our way of life is the pathway to the future. Now, in this episode, you're going to learn how to pursue something you love without the qualifications, why you don't need to be that lemonade entrepreneurial kid to make things happen, the power of relationships when you're building something on the side, why it's not too late to make a career change, the biggest thing that our generation is changing, how our generation is different from those before us, and the common misconceptions about the millennial generation. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this episode at bryanteare.com/091. But for now, guys, let's go hang out with Benjamin. Welcome back, everyone, and a big welcome to today's guest. I'm speaking to Benjamin Baldwin. Benjamin, welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback.
Hey, Bryan. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about the project you've started with Misunderstood, and we'll get to that in a few minutes, I'm sure. But for people listening who don't know who it is that you are and what you do, why don't you tell us a bit about your quarter life story?
Great. So, I am a millennial filmmaker living in Atlanta, Georgia, trying to be as creative as possible and kind of explore the realm of film as much as possible. And I really, wanted to create something that could kind of reach and hopefully kind of engage the millennial generation. It's a generation that is in many ways is like the series is called Misunderstood, and there's a lot of misconceptions. And I wanted to kind of bring a group of people together to kind of talk and explore the ideas of a generation. And that's kind of where I am now. So I created a series for Instagram, and so that's kind of where I am.
Yeah, I love it's so innovative. Like, I've never seen a documentary series done exclusively on Instagram. So I love that you've used that platform, which is obviously really popular amongst us millennials. But before we get into that, let's chat about you for a bit. And you mentioned filmmaking, but you actually didn't study film, even though I know you said it's always been a passion of yours. But you still ended up working for some pretty big clients like Vice and ESPN, National Geographic, Geographic, History Channel, MTV, and a lot more. And I think there's a big lesson there in that you don't need to go the traditional route of, study for something for a few years, invest thousands of dollars in it, and then only really begin doing the thing. I wonder if you could just talk about that for a little.
Yeah, I'm actually a big proponent of that. I didn't go to film school, and, film was always a passion. It was always a side thing for me. I was actually an American Studies major at a liberal arts college in the United States. And basically, I spent my entire education, studying something that I wasn't going to use in the outside world, but I ended up getting into internships. And I really don't think you need to go necessarily to film school to follow your dreams, or, especially in the film world. I ended up right after college managing a lot of interns at some big companies, and they all came from NYU or, UC Berkeley and all these, places where they have really great film programs. But, you really learn on the job, and you learn as what you're doing. And it is, you don't need to spend all that effort necessarily to follow your dreams. And I think that, if you really just say you didn't go to film school and, you're, say, in your mid-20s or something, and you want to get into film, I would just suggest you look for opportunities on the side, and eventually you can turn that into a full-time career. It's not something that you need to dive into at age 18 or, start making movies at 12, like some people do. And I definitely didn't do that. But it's just something that you, in really in any industry, just follow your passion, follow your dreams, and hopefully you can make it work. And for me, I got very lucky in my network and my connections, and kind of through internships and through meeting people and stuff like that. And I just really worked hard on the side to kind of try to get where I am today.
Yeah, and I think, you said you got really lucky with relationships and that kind of thing, but you can call it luck, but I actually don't think it's so much luck as it is doors opening up because you put out the message to the universe or whatever you want to call that, like, hey, I'm doing this thing, I'm committed, I'm taking action here. Whereas like those things wouldn't have happened if you hadn't done anything. And I think the other cool thing that you mentioned there was not only that, you can start it on the side without having to get the expensive education, but also that you don't have to start doing this thing from young. Like if you haven't always been the lemonade stand entrepreneur guy, you can still get started in your early 20s. There's so many opportunities nowadays.
Yeah, of course. Not only in your 20s, your 30s, really whenever, not only in film and any career, I think, and that's kind of how our generation is paving the way. A lot of people are looking at it like, say, my dad worked for a bank, and I'm going to go work for a bank and do the same thing, and I'm going to kind of follow my family's footsteps. But, people are kind of realizing that, they want to be happy. They want to do what they want to do. They want to be their authentic selves. And, I think even if you, went to a school and, had a business major or something like that, and you're 28 and you're not loving your job, and even if you're making decent money, you can change career paths at any time. And I think that's kind of what our generation is hopefully changing, and that you want to do what makes you happy.
Yeah, and I was actually, coming back to something you mentioned just now, I was actually thinking the other day, it's been about 3 years since I kind of went on my own path and quit my job, which I studied for 4 years for. I luckily didn't have to pay for that. It was, my father educated me and my brothers, which I'm really grateful for. But if I was thinking about this, and I was thinking like, if I had started what I had done when I was straight out of school, so 18, I would have been 21 with the experience I have now. Now, obviously, you can't just, carbon copy everything because certain things wouldn't have unfolded as they have. But, hypothetically speaking, if you're 18 and you put in like 2, 3, 4 years of learning about a specific topic and helping people with a specific problem, you can become an expert really young. And I think that's what's really exciting about the millennial generation is we're seeing people like 23, 24 years old really making a big impact in the world. Whereas before, if you follow the traditional path, people would say, you're only 23 years old. How can you be doing X, Y, Z? Which I think is really exciting.
No, of course. And I think that's, even though I entered, into the film world, I started in a very corporate environment, kind of a 9 to 5, world. And I think that, people, look at you when you are an entry level position and when you just start out, they don't really look at you the same way. They don't treat you, as, an equal. They treat you as kind of someone that is entry level, is new to this world. But we have a lot of input, and we have a lot of ideas, and we have a lot of creativity. And I think that the more employers and whoever it is, just to listen to not only the youth, but the people coming into your company, because we do have a lot of great ideas, and we are very valuable, and we are kind of the future of the employment world, and also the way things are done today.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with Smiley Pozwalski, but he does a lot of speaking on the millennial generation. I can put you guys in touch, but a part of his keynote talk on millennials, he says, like, we're not the me generation, we're the purpose generation, which I love. He's got these massive slides that say that. So you should
well, that's funny that you say the me generation, because how Misunderstood works is each week we feature a series or a theme that kind of explores the millennial generation. And one of the themes that we have upcoming is me, and the idea that kind of people see us as very selfish and stuff like that, but we're not selfish. We're just trying to change the way the older generations have set the standard, and we're trying to create this new movement. And I think that's kind of important to understand and to listen to for.
Yeah, what I think is really ironic, and I want to move on to the next point here, but so what I think is really ironic is the older generation path was kind of like, get a job, stick to it for 40 years, and get your retirement. That was it. Which to me, that almost sounds kind of selfish, because then you are just thinking like, I'm just going to stay in this thing. Whereas I find a lot of millennials are more interested in having, leaving an impact and making a small dent in whatever way they can, and starting these entrepreneurial ventures, which at the end of the day, the point of entrepreneurship is to solve people's problems. So I don't see how that's really selfish, but we can leave that there. Something that I did want to mention is that you mentioned to me via email that you mentioned work-life balance while also striving for success. I'd love to get your view on, your personal definitions of those two things, work-life balance and success.
Yeah, I think, work-life balance and success, I think it is, as we change and as we grow older and as, generations change, definitely is kind of a growing and evolving concept. And the idea, maybe of success for our parents and for our grandparents, may have been, like you said earlier, you get a job, and you work that job for 40 years, you support your family. In many ways, in the United States, it's the American dream. You make a better life for your kids and future generations. And I think millennials today and, younger generations, we're starting to, realize that that's not really what we are striving for. Success is kind of changing. And, obviously I can't speak for everyone, but, for me, at least, success is happiness, and is making sure you have a lot of, love and support and friends, and it doesn't necessarily have to deal with money. And I think I would much rather be around great friends and have be able to travel and be able to do things that I wouldn't be able to do if I sat at a desk for 40 years and just kind of focused on, working for the man. I view success in very many ways on, what you have going on in your life and how you can kind of, completely, balance, your work and your personal time. And in many ways, sometimes you can kind of, the two can kind of coincide, perfectly. And, I definitely have been at times in my life when, I've been working 80, 90-hour weeks. And then there's times when I'm only working a few hours a week and, say 20 hours a week. And, I'm still, may not be making as much money, but I'm much happier.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Now, I want to shift the conversation to misunderstood. Before I get there, what have you found, I guess, to be some of the distinguishing characteristics of our millennial generation? I know we've touched on some of them, but what are some of the others that really set us apart from previous generations?
One thing that sets us apart is, we're very progressive and we're very constantly, and I obviously cannot speak for the entire millennial generation, but, we're looking for change, and we're looking to not only make ourselves happier, but make the world a better place. And I think we're trying to change a lot of the wrongs and a lot of the concepts of the, past generations, whether it comes through, sexuality, whether it comes through gender or race. We're trying to be more open and more accepting. And, it's, if you look at studies and then you look at the charts, the millennial generation is one of the more open generations of, the past, 100 years. And we are looking to kind of create a world that is more open and open to discussion and stuff like that. So I think, progressive is definitely one of the best words you could use to describe the millennial generation as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. So let's get into it then. Tell us a bit about Misunderstood. What is it? What is the format and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so, Misunderstood is a passion project of mine that I started thinking and creating about a year ago. I wanted to find a platform that could reach as many people as possible. And, I could have done the, TV route, or you could have done, the traditional documentary and stuff. And it takes a lot of time, effort, and, money for that to work out. And the great thing about, Instagram and, social media platforms is that they're free and everyone has access to them if you have a smartphone, in which a lot of the population does. So I think I chose Instagram because it's a very popular platform, and it is a platform that not only has video but is able to reach as many people as possible. And so I chose to cast and get together a group of 13 millennials to discuss misconceptions about the millennial generation. And each week, these millennials or the cast members give their input, their insight into what that theme, may suggest. For example, our first week, we focused on My Filtered Life, which, kind of focuses on the idea that millennials use social media very heavily and are constantly on our phones and, taking pictures and selfies and all this kind of thing. And for other generations, they might see that as a very negative thing, but for our generation, it might be positive. And to kind of get the input together and kind of it explores the themes of millennial generations.
I love that. So it's almost like a roundtable discussion on different topics, except that the people aren't all together. They're sharing their personal insights on each topic.
Yeah, so it's kind of, it's definitely, it's getting, and I tried to cast as many people across the spectrum as possible through gender, sexuality, race, and to kind of get as much perspective as we could. And, these people are across the United States, and we actually even have two people in Europe. And the idea is to hopefully kind of, further connect, if we do a second season, to connect more people across the world, not only so we can see a perspective of a millennial in the United States, but a perspective of millennials across the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd love to get involved in that somehow. So I'm sure we'll stay in touch. Now, what prompted you to create the documentary? Was there a personal experience? Had you, had enough of those entitled millennial comments? What led you down the route of pursuing this passion project?
Yeah, so I wanted to create a series that kind of would reach people and kind of would have an impact. And I've always wanted to do something, whether it was a documentary or a series that could speak to a lot of people. And I think, I started thinking about it about a year ago, and I think it really truly came from, if you're online, and I'm constantly, going through news articles and, pages and, different things online. And or wherever you are basically in your life. And you'll stumble upon just all the time, whether it's YouTube, Google, the news, and you'll stumble upon just kind of comments about millennials and just like passive aggressive comments, whether it is in the media. And I think, after, reading all these articles and reading, and stumbling upon, in my everyday life, just, people, whether it was side comments of people saying millennials were lazy or, we're entitled, or, just through various platforms, I, was driven to change and hopefully give our generation more of a voice, through this series. And that's kind of what I was striving for.
Totally. Now, you mentioned misconceptions. What are some of the common misconceptions about millennials? And I'd love to contrast that with, some of the thoughts of the cast members that shared their ideas on the documentary.
There's a lot of misconceptions about millennials out there, and I think that, we're beginning to touch on them in the series. And, when I was creating the series, we sat down and we did a lot of research and a lot of reviews about, what some of these misconceptions were. And we started out, compiling a list of things that, were either misconceptions or, kind of viewpoints of our generation. And we created a huge list, and we decided, which topics we're going to talk about first. And, exploring kind of like the ideas of, our generation being super lazy or self-entitled or selfish. And these are kind of concepts that we hope to explore and kind of hope to give more insight to through our series.
Mm-hmm. And what's been some of the reaction from the series so far?
Some of the reaction, I always, I get a lot of messages on Instagram through the Misunderstood page, of people saying, this is great. This is awesome. This is, I've been looking for something like this. And a lot of people also want to be a part of it in some way. And I think that's kind of what is amazing about the series is it's not a series that, is about celebrities or about, people like of that nature. It's more about the everyday millennial. It's your neighbor, it's your colleague, it's your friend, it's your family member. It's, someone, you can meet through social media. It's just, it's for everyone. And I think, it's not only for the millennial generation, but also for older generations to kind of explore and come in and say, hey, maybe I had this misconception about, a new millennial colleague that I have, but, maybe I can understand their mindset, or it's for, a millennial who may be struggling and not understand, what or why their boss or, their someone is treating them a certain way. And I think it's definitely for people to understand not only our generation better, but how to kind of coexist in a better way. And through the series, I think a lot of people have reacted to wanting to be a part of it and wanting to kind of hear more from us.
Yeah, I must say that's one of the things that I love the most is that it's not people you would have heard about before. It's kind of like regular guys and girls that you would bump into on the street, which I really like, because it's kind of like this show too, where people have sent me emails and said, like the stories I've shared and people that I've interviewed has been really relatable and have given them sort of inspiration that they can make a change too, which was kind of my vision for the show. But what is kind of your vision for Misunderstood?
I hope, and my vision for the series is, not only help people, but connect people. I want to, not just, in the United States, but across the world. I want people to look to the series and kind of be able to say, wow, like these are the conversations going on today about our generation. And I want people to kind of have a better insight, and maybe, someone can tune in and, it can make them feel better that they're not alone. They're welcome to always reach out to our team for advice or help. I just want people to be connected and kind of have a better insight into who we are. And hopefully with that, a lot of these misconceptions, will hopefully over time go away, and we can, kind of come together to make the world a better place. And I know that is kind of a vague term, but even small steps can make a big impact.
Mm-hmm. I love it, man. What would be your message to other generations?
I think to other generations would be to be open to change, open to discussion, and open to different viewpoints.
Benjamin, are there any points we haven't touched on that you feel would be worth mentioning for people listening?
If you're listening, I would say, tune in to Misunderstood on Instagram. You can find it at misunderstood.doc. And, if you have any suggestions, if you have any ideas on how the series could run, if you want to be a part of it, in any way, we're always looking for new ideas. It is truly a series for everyone. And I hope that you will reach out, and I will, definitely will get back to you as soon as possible, because we love input and feedback. And so I'd be happy for anyone out there to reach out.
Yeah, and I'll link up everything in the show notes that we mentioned today. I do want to be mindful of the time, but I've got some quickfire questions at the end here. So just whatever comes to mind first in a sentence or two is perfect. The first question is, what do you wish you'd been told, I guess, early in your 20s?
That nothing is permanent, that you can make your own path. And, if you mess up, you can get back on your feet, basically. Mm-hmm. Nothing is going to be permanent.
Mm-hmm. I love it. What is the biggest opportunity for quarter lifers or millennials today? Honestly, I think it's,
their openness, their progressiveness. I think that is, tuning into other people and tuning into their empathy. I think, being able to connect with others, I think that is what is most important for us.
Mm-hmm. I've got one final question. Before I get to that, where can people go to find out more about you? And I know you did mention misunderstood.doc on Instagram, but just give us any other links we might need to go check out.
Yeah, so if you want to check out Misunderstood, you can go to Instagram and go to misunderstood.doc is the username. And we are uploading videos and content each week.
I love it. And again, I will link up all of that in the show notes. Benjamin, before I get to the final question, I just want to take a second to acknowledge you for not only coming on today and sharing your story and what you're up to with Misunderstood, but just the work that you're doing to kind of change the way that other generations see millennials. Obviously, we're a generation with extreme potential and creativity and innovation and that kind of thing. And just the fact that you're trying to show that to the world and show that we're not a sort of selfish, lazy, entitled generation. I just want to acknowledge you for that. And the final question that I do have is, what one thing can listeners do this week to start creating their own quarter life comeback?
I think if you want to start your quarter life comeback, I think would just be being open to discussion and conversation, whether it is with someone of a different generation or our own generation. Just sit down and have a discussion. Any misconceptions, anything that's not working, whether it's at home or in the workplace or in school, kind of immerse yourself in the topics and the discussions of things that might, be causing a rift or, any issues. And I think that just really being able to open up to the conversation and kind of exploring the differences is a great way to get started and kind of see where you are and see where others are and kind of getting on the same common ground.
I love it. Benjamin Baldwin, thank you so much for coming on the Quarter Life Comeback.
Thank you so much, Brian, for having me. It was a pleasure.
So there you have it, guys and girls. That wraps up episode 91 of the Quarter Life Comeback podcast. And a big thanks to Ben for coming on the show and sharing what he's up to with the Misunderstood project. I really love that he's bringing awareness to some of these issues. And if you like this one, please share it around with your friends on social media and shoot me a tweet at Bryan Teare to let me know your biggest takeaway. For me, the biggest takeaway was that Ben is doing the thing that he really loves, and that is creating film. And he doesn't have any formal qualification for it. It's just time spent in the trenches, learning the ropes and getting experience in the thing that he really enjoyed doing, and he's turned it into a career. So it's never too late for you, never impossible. Just start doing the thing that you love on the side, and eventually you can transition that into an income. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this episode at bryanteare.com/091. And make sure you subscribe at quarterlifecomeback.com to get all these episodes as soon as they go live. Thanks once again for joining me this week. I appreciate you as always. And until next week, keep creating your quarter life comeback.